Streakwave Wireless is a value-added global distributor for the fixed broadband wireless and Wi-Fi industries. We provide equipment and related products for all your Wi-Fi and broadband needs. And so we've got a lot of folks that are very well educated in these categories with a number of product lines. And so we can be reached at 888-604-5234 or streakwave.com. Our presenter today will be Joel Crane from MetaGeek, who is their human interface for training and support. We will have Q&A at the end of the presentation, so feel free to type in any questions you have along the way, and we'll get to them as many as we can. In addition, we'll be giving away some free gifts for the holiday season here. We've got 4 of the WiSpy Mini with InSSIDer Office. Those winners will be randomly selected at the end and then notified after the webinar. And as well, a promotional offer for MetaGeek solutions for all their products will be sent out as well after the webinar. So with that, let's begin. Welcome, Joel, and take it away.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Mike. My name is Joel, and I'm the training and support person here at MetaGeek. And just kind of a quick introduction. I've got a few different certifications in the wireless industry, and I'm pretty much the guy that answers the phone and answers support emails and things like that here at MetaGeek. I also get to do a lot of training events, and occasionally I get to teach classes and teach webinars similar to this one, introducing our tools and training people up on how to use our tools. So today we're going to focus on what's important in a wireless toolkit, why you need a wireless toolkit, and some different things that you can do with that. And I'll introduce you to several of our products here at MetaGeek, and then I'll show you some different site survey tools that are offered by other site survey vendors out there as well, so that you can be familiar with all the different tools that are available in the space. Just a couple of housekeeping items, like Mike said. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the question tool. We do have quite a few attendees on this webinar today, so I'll get to as many questions as I can. With us, we also have Lael here. She is our channel manager here at MetaGeek, and she also knows a ton about Wi-Fi. So if you have any questions, she'll be able to answer those questions via text as well. So keep an eye out for those responses from Lael. And Mike might attempt to answer any kind of the channel questions, sales questions that you might have as well. So feel free to ask questions throughout the course of the webinar, and of course we will have a question and answer time at the end. I may defer some questions to that, and I may defer some questions until a little later when I know I'm going to cover that topic. So just keep an eye out for that. So when we're talking about wireless tools, one of the things that's really, really critical is there's some basics in Wi-Fi, some really important building blocks in Wi-Fi that are super important for you to understand as you're looking at building out a wireless toolkit and effectively using those tools. I like to tell people that you're only as effective with a wireless tool as you understand the underlying protocol. It's really important to understand how 802.11 works, to understand how Wi-Fi works, to really effectively be able to use these tools. So we'll go over a few basics really quick. For many of you, these might be really familiar. For many of you, this might be the first time you've heard this. So we'll get everybody up to speed and kind of on the same page. And then we'll make some comparisons between those tools, and we'll actually spend some time using those tools. We'll do some live demos of those tools as well. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is the half duplex nature of Wi-Fi. Now, many of us are familiar with an Ethernet cable, where with Ethernet in a single cable, we have multiple twisted pairs of copper inside the same cable. And the result of that is that we can send traffic in a couple of directions at the same time. It's kind of like a 2-lane highway. You can send traffic east and west simultaneously. Traffic can flow in 2 directions. But with Wi-Fi, that's not the case. Wi-Fi is half duplex, which means we can only send traffic in one direction at a time. So let's say that we have an access point here. This is like a good enterprise-grade access point, and then we have an 11-inch MacBook Air here, which is what I'm presenting from today. And let's say that this access point needs to send a data frame to the laptop. If it sends a data frame, and if the laptop tries to transmit a frame at the same time, they're just going to cancel each other out. And I did get one comment from Mike. He says that he's not seeing the presentation. Is anybody else having some trouble, or are you able to see the presentation okay? Maybe Lael can check really quick for me to make sure. All right, Sean says he can see it. Oh yeah, lots of people can see it. So Mike, unfortunately, probably something on your end. Great, thanks for the feedback, everybody. So if we have 2 devices that try to talk at the same time, they're just going to interrupt each other. They're just going to cancel each other out. It's just like if a couple of people are talking, and maybe you're talking with a friend and you both say something at the exact same time. You can't understand them and they can't understand you if you say something simultaneously. It's the exact same way with Wi-Fi, and so we've got to keep an eye out for that. We have to understand that as we're looking at wireless tools. So here's what a wireless conversation looks like. In this example, we've got our same access point and our same laptop here. And if the access point needs to transmit a data frame, it's going to wait until the air is clear, until there's nothing talking, until it's nice and quiet, and it's going to transmit that data frame. And then the laptop is going to check out that data frame and make sure that it understood it. And once it knows that it understood it, it goes, yep, check, I understood that data frame. It's going to reply with an acknowledgement, or we shorten it, we just call an ACK in Wi-Fi. It's short for acknowledgement. Now, a couple things can go wrong here. Let's say if the laptop is a little bit too far away and that data frame just never makes it to the laptop. Well, the laptop will never send that acknowledgement, and so the access point will wait around for the acknowledgement, and eventually it's going to go, okay, well, I never heard that acknowledgement, so the laptop must not have received the frame. So it's going to send it again, and it's going to send it again. It's going to keep retransmitting that frame until finally that frame makes it through that laptop, and the laptop can go, yep, check, I received the data frame, we have that data frame, we got it. You don't need to send it again. So this is a very, very common thing that we see in Wi-Fi pretty much all the time. Now, the big takeaway from this is that on this channel, the big takeaway is that only one of these devices can talk at a time. On any given channel at any given time, only one Wi-Fi device can talk at a time. And that's pretty much what every wireless tool out there is based around. It's based around this concept that Wi-Fi is half duplex, so that only one device can talk at a time. Now, to further illustrate that, let's say that we've got an access point here, and we've got a few different devices on the channel, and let's say that we've got an Android phone here that's transmitting a data frame to the access point. While that conversation is occurring, all of these devices are going to be quiet and wait for their turn to talk. On any given channel at any given time, only one device can talk, and so when one device is talking, all the other devices have to be quiet. And when you start thinking about non-Wi-Fi interference and interference from things like cordless phones and wireless video cameras and microwave ovens and baby monitors and the list of things that operates in the 2.4 gigahertz band and the 5 gigahertz band along with Wi-Fi devices goes on and on and on and on. And the problem with these devices, like a microwave oven, is that they don't have the same mechanisms built in to check and make sure that there's nothing talking first. Essentially, they're not nearly as polite as a Wi-Fi device. Wi-Fi is really polite. It's good at checking to make sure that nobody's talking. It's a very, very polite conversation that happens very efficiently. But non-Wi-Fi devices, like a microwave oven, they don't care. It's just there to microwave food, and it's not going to do any of those checks. And so when a microwave oven starts essentially talking on the channel and spilling interference out onto the channel, all those Wi-Fi devices are going to see that, and they're all just going to back off and be quiet and wait for their turn to talk. They're all just going to continually be quiet and wait for a turn to talk. Now there are some solutions out there which are offering full duplex radios, but they're probably not Wi-Fi compliant, and they're probably not a true Wi-Fi device that interoperates with other Wi-Fi devices. They're probably using a couple of different channels out there to accomplish something like that. But great comment, Rick. That's really interesting. I'll have to check out those technologies and see exactly how they are accomplishing that. Now, the next thing that's really important to understand when you're looking at wireless tools and evaluating what kind of tools you should get to build out your wireless toolkit is the differences between 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. There's some big differences between the two that are really, really important. Really important to understand. So let's take a look at, let's compare the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz band to see how they compare. Now the 2.4 gigahertz band, as you probably already know, has a greater range. It has a range of about 300 feet. And that's because it's got a nice and long wavelength, and that nice long wavelength is able to punch through stuff better. It attenuates less, which means it goes through things like doors and walls and windows and people much better than the 5 gigahertz band. The 5 gigahertz band has a lower indoor range of only about 90 feet. Now, most you know that this is going to change depending on your environment and the equipment that you're using, but most vendors are going to advertise about a 90-foot range with the 5 gigahertz band. And that's because the wavelengths are shorter. The wavelengths are much closer together, and so it doesn't punch through stuff nearly as well. It attenuates more. It doesn't go through things nearly as well. Now, when you put 2.4 and 5 gigahertz next to each other out in an open field or outside, they really have about the same range. It's indoors where you really see the difference in range. 2.4 gigahertz is also universally compatible. There are tons of Wi-Fi devices out there that pretty much every Wi-Fi device out there supports 2.4 gigahertz out of the box. And the reason for this goes all the way back to 1997 when the first 802.11 standard was introduced. That's before we even called it Wi-Fi. The term Wi-Fi didn't come around for another 5 years. But when the original 802.11 standard was introduced in 1997, it was a 2.4 gigahertz only standard. We started out in the 2.4 gigahertz band. And a couple years later, we introduced 802.11b, which got us some faster data rates. And at the same time, we introduced 802.11a, which was much faster, but it was in the 5 gigahertz band. Now, there was kind of a face-off between these two technologies. The 2.4 gigahertz stuff had been around for a while, so it was backwards compatible with the stuff that was made in 97, and it was cheaper because they'd already been making it for a couple of years, and the range was better. It had about a 300-foot range, whereas 5 gigahertz, even though it was much, much faster, had that much shorter range, and it was in a brand new slice of spectrum, so it was much more expensive to produce. So in the end, 2.4 gigahertz ended up being much more popular, and it still is to this day. To this day, 2.4 gigahertz is kind of the default band. It's where everybody goes. It's kind of where everyone goes by default. Whereas the 5 gigahertz band, we see limited compatibility. We still see a lot of devices out there that don't support the 5 gigahertz band. Now, there's a couple of ways that how you can tell, that you can use to tell whether it supports 5 gigahertz or not. If you look at a device and it says BGN, that means it's probably a 2.4 gigahertz only device. And don't let the N throw you off. 802.11n can exist in the 2.4 or the 5 gigahertz band. 802.11n does not mean that it supports 5 gigahertz out of the box. However, if you see 802.11a or 802.11ac, those are 5 gigahertz only standards, and so now you know that that device definitely supports 5 gigahertz. It's proof that it supports the 5 gigahertz band. There still are a lot of devices out there that don't support 5 gigahertz. Even this year, Motorola released a new phone called the Moto G, and I actually bought my wife one about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and she loves it. It's a great phone, and it was only about $180 on Amazon without a contract. Really inexpensive phone, and it's a great phone. However, it is 802.11b GN only. It is a 2.4 gigahertz only device. And you'll still see a lot of devices out there that are 2.4 gigahertz only, like inexpensive Windows laptops. I think there's a few Chromebooks out there that are 2.4 gigahertz only. Budget Android phones, like the one that I just mentioned, are 2.4 gigahertz only. So keep an eye out for that. There are still a lot of devices out there that are not supporting the 5 gigahertz. So what's wrong with 2.4 gigahertz? Well, a few things. First off, it's highly congested with Wi-Fi. It's been the default band for so long that we see tons and tons of devices out there that only support, or that we see tons and tons of devices that are on the 2.4 gigahertz band. It's also plagued with non-Wi-Fi interference. We see interference from things like cordless phones and microwave ovens and Xbox 360 controllers. There's just tons of stuff in the 2.4 gigahertz band that causes interference. And also, probably the worst problem with 2.4 gigahertz, the thing that's the worst thing about it at all, is that there are only 3 channels, 3 non-overlapping channels that we have to work with in the 2.4 gigahertz band. Whereas in the 5 gigahertz band, we have 24 non-overlapping channels to work with. We have way more channels to work with. There's a ton of space in the 5 gigahertz band. And remember, only one device can talk on a channel at a time, so we are limited for how much data we can move through the air in the 2.4 gigahertz band, whereas in the 5 gigahertz, we have a lot more space for things to operate. Now, you may be wondering yourself, you may have looked at this slide, you may have said, okay, hang on a second, Joel. You're telling me that there are only 3 channels in the 2.4 gigahertz band. I'm pretty sure that there are 11. Well, you're right, but here's the thing. Each wireless channel is 20 megahertz wide, so the width of the channel is a full 20 megahertz wide. Now, the problem with this is that each channel is only separated on center by 5 megahertz. You see how the math doesn't really add up here. So when we look at where channel 1 is and where channel 2 is, here's about where channel 1 is. It's going to take up about that much space, and then we move over 5 megahertz. Channel 2 is going to overlap with channel 1 by about 75%. And so there's just not enough room for all these channels in the 2.4 gigahertz band. The end result is that we have 3 channels to work with. We have channel 1, we have channel 6, and we have channel 11. Those are the only 3 channels that we have to work with in the 2.4 gigahertz band that don't overlap. And we'll talk about why it's bad that they overlap here in just a moment. So let's compare. Let's compare all the different types of interference. One disclaimer I should make really quick is my mouse has a very sensitive scroll wheel and it likes to zing through my slides. So if the slides jump around, I do apologize for that. I'll try to keep that from happening. So let's take a look at the 3 different types of interference that we're going to encounter so that you can be familiar with what these types of interference are. These are really, really important to understand. The first, we talked about this quite a bit when we talked about the half duplex nature of Wi-Fi, and that is co-channel interference. With co-channel interference, every client and access point on the same channel is going to take turns talking. They're going to compete for time to talk. This is a lot like a dinner table conversation. If you're sitting around the dinner table with some family and some friends, like I'm sure many of us did at Thanksgiving, then you're all going to politely take turns talking. But when you get too many people at the table, when you get too many people on the channel, then there's not enough time left for everyone to talk. If you put 100 Wi-Fi devices on a channel, then pretty soon you start running out of time for everyone to talk. Now, co-channel interference, of these 3 types of interference, this is the least bad one to have. This one you can work on, this one we can work with, but we do want to limit the amount of devices that we have on a single channel to make sure that everybody gets enough time to talk. Now, the next type of interference is called adjacent channel interference, and this is where we use channels that partially overlap. So in this example, we've got a network on channel 4, we've got a network on channel 5, and we have a network on channel 6. All 3 of these channels partially overlap with each other. Now, instead of politely taking turns talking like we do with co-channel interference, these 3 networks and all the devices on those networks are just going to yell over each other. They're just going to interrupt each other. They're going to have to repeat themselves over and over and over again because they're going to continually get interrupted. Adjacent channel interference is one of the easiest types of interference to fix, but it's one of the most damaging things out there for Wi-Fi at all. If we wanted to make 2.4 gigahertz a better place for everyone, we would all of us always use channels 1, 6, and 11, and that way we could completely eliminate adjacent channel interference and we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. And finally, the last type of interference that we're going to talk about today is non-Wi-Fi interference. This is interference from things like microwave ovens and cordless phones and wireless video cameras and Bluetooth devices and all those different things that work in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz band. Non-802.11 devices, that means non-Wi-Fi devices, also need time to talk. They also need time to get on the air and say what they need to say. They also need to be able to get on and talk, and they're using the exact same channels, the exact same frequencies as Wi-Fi gear. And like I said earlier, with non-Wi-Fi devices, the problem with these devices is that they're not nearly as polite as Wi-Fi. They will just get on the air and they will just talk. So that's something that we need to combat. That's something that we need to be very, very aware of as we're working with Wi-Fi. So let's take a look at some of the different wireless tools out there and how you can use these tools to resolve these different types of interference, how you can resolve co-channel interference, how you can fix adjacent channel interference, and how you can check for and avoid non-Wi-Fi interference. So we'll start by looking at InSSIDer, which is a Wi-Fi scanning tool. InSSIDer Office uses your Wi-Fi adapter to scan for wireless networks, so you can see where those networks are, you can see which channels they're on, you can see what signal strengths they're on, and that's a great way to make sure that your access point is on the best channel that can possibly be on to perform the best. Channel selection is absolutely critical, and it's one of the first things that you should do when you deploy a new wireless network. Next is Channelizer, and this is a spectrum analyzer. This is a tool that can see all of the raw radio frequency activity in our environment, so that you can make sure that you're not being plagued with non-Wi-Fi interference or similar things. We'll also take a brief look at IEPA, and this is a packet analysis tool. Now, a spectrum analyzer like Channelizer, that looks at the raw radio frequency activity. That looks at layer 1. A packet analysis tool looks at the conversations between wireless devices, so you can see, in a sense, you can see what they're saying, you can see how fast they're talking, and that's really useful for troubleshooting those co-channel interference issues. We'll cover that a little bit more in depth. And then finally, we'll take a look at some site survey tools. These are tools that help you determine where your access points should be placed. You can upload a floor plan, and you can determine where your access points should be placed. And then when they're installed in the building, you can walk around the building, and it'll actually draw a coverage map based on all that information that you've plugged in and that you've gathered during your site survey. So we'll take a good look at all 4 of these different types of tools so that you can be really familiar with them and how to use them. So first, I want to make a differentiation between a couple of different types of tools. I want to differentiate between a Wi-Fi scanner and a spectrum analyzer. What's the difference between those tools? Well, a Wi-Fi scanner uses a normal Wi-Fi adapter to scan for wireless networks. But the problem with a Wi-Fi adapter is that it only speaks Wi-Fi. Now, this is pretty useful for us because we get some information like this where we can see where all the wireless networks are in our wireless environment. So I can see I have a couple of access points here on channel 1. I've got a couple of access points here on channel 6. I've got an access point here on channel 8. See that one right there centered on channel 8? So he's interfering with everyone on channel 6 and everyone on channel 11. Good job. And this is actually my access point here on the desk for testing purposes. And then I've got a couple of access points here on channel 11. So what we can use here is we could easily look at this, and if this was our network, if MetaGeek Lab was our network, we could go, oh, wow, we're interfering with everyone on channel 6 and 11. Let's move to a better channel. Let's maybe go over here to channel 1. That's probably the best. That's probably the best channel for us to be on because that there's only a couple networks there, and we won't be partially overlapping with anyone anymore. You can also use these to make sure that you've got good security implemented. You can make sure that there aren't any rogue access points that you haven't authorized on your network. There's lots of things that you can use a Wi-Fi scanner for. But here's the problem with them. Since they use a Wi-Fi adapter and since it can only speak Wi-Fi, we don't actually really get to know what's going on this channel. Is channel 1 the best channel to be on, really? How busy are these 2 access points? Is anyone streaming Netflix right now? Is anyone is anyone doing an FTP file transfer? We really don't have any way to know exactly how busy this channel is from a Wi-Fi standpoint. The other thing that we don't know is we don't know if there's any non-Wi-Fi devices here. Is there a cordless phone right there on channel 6 that's interfering with those networks? We don't really have a way to know. All we know is that that's where wireless access points are, but we miss a lot of data when we just use a dedicated Wi-Fi scanner. And that's where spectrum analysis comes in. A spectrum analyzer is a special piece of hardware that can hear all of the raw radio frequency activity in the environment. It can hear everything. It can hear the Wi-Fi devices talking. It can hear the microwave ovens. It can hear the Xbox 360 controllers. It can hear anything that's causing interference in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands. And so this is our product by MetaGeek. This is a WiSpy DBX. There's a couple of different models. And yes, Jacob, you do need this. It's awesome, and this is a tool that I'd recommend that every single wireless engineer out there has, because without a spectrum analyzer, you're kind of running blind. There's really no way to know exactly what's going on without a spectrum analyzer. So this is a USB device. This plugs into your laptop, and there's a piece of software that goes along with it. There's a couple of different pieces of software. I'll show you both of them, so you'll get to see both of them live. But this tool, with this, you can see all of that raw radio frequency activity in the environment. You can see everything that's going on. You can see how busy each Wi-Fi channel is. And to answer your question, Mike, yes, there is a Mac version of this in beta that we'll talk about. There is a Mac version. It is in beta, so just be aware of that, but it is out there. And to answer Brian's question, the WiSpy DBX is 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. That's what the DB stands for. I actually worked at MetaGeek for a couple of years before I knew that, so don't make too much fun of me there. But there's a couple different models, and I'll introduce you to all those different models as well. So the 2 things that you can do with this that are really important is we can see non-Wi-Fi interference. That's probably the biggest thing, is if there's a cordless phone there that's causing interference, you can see it. If there's a microwave oven that's causing interference, you can see it. You finally get some visibility into what's been going on with your wireless network all this time. The other thing that I really love about these is you can see how busy each Wi-Fi channel is too. Remember how only one Wi-Fi device can talk on a channel at a time? Well, we need to be able to see how often devices are talking on a channel. And if we were to look down here at channel 11, and if we could see that devices were only talking 10% of the time, that's like, hooray, we have 90% of time left for other devices to talk. That means that we've got a nice, healthy channel. But if devices are talking on that channel 70% of the time, and we know that we have a problem. There's a lot of activity on that channel. There's a lot of co-channel interference, and that's something that we need to check out. So with a WiSpy, we can hear everything. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to demo 2 tools. There's 2 tools that utilize the WiSpy. And the first one is a tool called InSSIDer Office. So this is primarily a Wi-Fi scanning tool, but we've pulled spectrum analysis data into this tool as well so that you can see what's going on in your wireless environment. So give me just a moment to switch over to my demo for that. And great questions, everybody. I'm probably going to wait. Towards the end to answer some of these questions. It looks like Mike and Lael are getting in there and answering a lot of those questions. Thanks, guys, for doing that. That's really helpful. So, but I may have to defer some of those to the end. So, great questions, though. Keep them coming. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen again now, and what we've got running here is we've got a copy of InSSIDer Office running on Windows, and to answer Scott's question, this is Windows 10 compatible. I'm running it in Windows 10 now, and it's been working great in Windows 10 since the day the Windows 10 was released. There is a Mac version of this. It is currently in beta. However, you may have noticed that I'm actually just running this in a virtual machine. So I'm running this in VMware Fusion, and it's working great. So we are pulling data from two sources here. We're getting our Wi-Fi data from a normal Wi-Fi adapter. In this case, I've just got an inexpensive Netgear A6200 USB Wi-Fi adapter. If you're running this on a normal Windows laptop, you have a Wi-Fi adapter built in, so you're good to go. And we've got a Wi-Fi DBX plugged in, so we're getting our spectrum analysis data as well. So first, let's talk about the wireless networks. We list out all the wireless networks that you can see nearby. This is very typical for most Wi-Fi scanners these days, and you can come through here and you can find your wireless network to learn some more information about it. Now down below, we've got a visualization here, and we draw a square. At MetaGeek, we lovingly call them ziggurats. That show you where the wireless networks are. You can see what channel they're on. You can see how loud they are. The taller it is, the louder that network is. And we can see them up here in the 5 gigahertz band as well too. So I could try to find my network in here, but that's going to take a while. So let's just apply a filter. So I'm just going to type in lab because I'm looking for this network right here, this one called MetaGeek Lab. We picked on this one earlier, and we're going to pick on it some more. So I'm going to get rid of my filter now. And so now we can see where MetaGeek Lab is. It's marked in blue. That's the one that we have selected right now. And we can see that MetaGeek Lab is on channel 8, and he is causing adjacent channel interference with all of these other access points. All of the other access points that are on all these other channels are receiving interference from our network that's here on channel 8. So one thing that InSSIDer is going to do for us is it's going to recommend a better channel. So the channel that we're on right now is channel 8, but it's going to recommend channel 1. So it's looking at where all the wireless networks are, what their signal strengths are, and who's partially overlapping, and it's looking at the data from the Wi-Fi to see what the busiest channel is, and it's telling us, hey, if you move to channel 8, channel 1 rather, this network and the other networks around you are all going to perform better. We also get a signal strength graph for this. We can see that this blue line is the network that we have selected right now, which is MetaGeek Lab. So we can see that our signal strength is about -40 dBm. That's a really good signal strength. And we have a dotted line here. This is a signal strength threshold, and that's a minimum threshold that we've set. And we say, hey, when we fall below that line, that means that this is not a good signal strength. So you can do some basic coverage checks with this tool. And the dotted red line, that's showing us the loudest partially overlapping network, which I'm going to say is probably this network that's named Data Closet right here. So there's two different ways to view networks in InSSIDer. There's physical mode, where we show you each and every physical access point. So for example, I'm actually just going to filter out MetaGeek really quick so we can see all the MetaGeek access points. And one thing that you may notice is that the MetaGeek access points actually have two SSIDs. We've got MetaGeek and MetaGeek Development on this particular access point. All of our access points here have two SSIDs on them, and so we have grouped those together, so instead of showing up like two access points, they show up as one because we know it's the same access point. And that's what we do in physical mode. Now there's another mode called logical mode, and with this one, we group together all the access points that have the same name. So if I click on MetaGeek, you'll notice that what we do here is that we automatically select every single access point that's part of the MetaGeek network. So you can see we have a whole bunch here, like Open Meeting 1 and Reception and Open Meeting 2. Now, I happen to know that this room, we don't actually call that room Open Meeting 1. We actually call it the galley. So if I want to, I could rename this particular access point to the galley. And so now I can assign friendly names to all of my access points with this tool, so I can keep track of which access point is where. So we've selected all of our access points here. Now there's another thing that I want to do for fun here. Let's close out the MetaGeek network and deselect it. I'm going to filter back down to Lab. We've got a feature built in here called Expert Tips, Expert Analysis Tips. And when you're in logical mode and when you select your wireless network, this particular network only has one access point, which is MetaGeek Lab. We actually give you some expert tips for some things that you can improve on your wireless network. And so we can see that there's a couple of configuration warnings and there's one security warning here. We've got about 20 different alerts that we'll throw based on different conditions. Now, one thing that we're seeing here is that access points in this network are not set to a standard channel like 1, 6, or 11. And if we followed that channel recommendation, this flag would go away. We can also see that we're supporting legacy 802.11b data rates, and you might want to consider getting rid of those 802.11b data rates. Now, if you don't understand what this means, there's a Learn More link here where you can take you right to our knowledge base, and we have details on what this means and why disabling this would actually improve the performance of your network. So we try to help you learn as you go with this tool. We're also showing this security warning. We are showing that this network has WEP enabled, which is a major security risk. In fact, we've got a broken lock here to show that WEP is a broken form of security. WEP stands for Wired Equivalent Protection, which is kind of a joke these days because this security standard was broken many years ago. I visited my grandma about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and when I was visiting her, I went to get on her Wi-Fi and realized it was WEP. And it was actually faster for me to use some security tools and break the encryption on the network than it was for her to go find the password for me. So WEP is a very broken standard, and we are saying, hey, you might want to fix that to have some security on your wireless network. So like I said, there's about 20 different alerts that we'll throw. Finally, there's a final tab here called the Channels tab. And in this view, we're looking strictly at the Wi-Spy data to show you what's going on from the Wi-Spy's perspective. And so Mike earlier in the chat said that the Wi-Spy is like magic glasses. That's exactly what it's like because we get to see everything that's happening in the spectrum. And here's what this visualization down here means. The colors basically tell us how busy things are. If you see a blue spike, that's something that's not very busy. Maybe we saw a little bit of activity there and then it disappeared. Not a big deal. Whereas if you see red, that means that there is constant activity there, kind of like an air horn. And remember, we want our channels to be as quiet as possible, right? Now, it's okay for a channel to be busy, if we're making activity on that channel. That's fine. If you're doing a throughput test and it gets busy, oh yeah, it's going to get busy, and that's totally fine. But what we're doing here is we're telling you how often the channel is being utilized. So, for example, we can see that channel 11 is being utilized about 28% of the time, and that's problematic for us. And we can see that that channel 1 is only being utilized about 12% of the time. So this is a far quieter channel, and that's part of why we saw that recommendation for channel 1 earlier. So with this tool, you can very, very quickly see what the busiest channel is and what the quietest channels are as well. And there's a few other things that I could show you, quite a few other things I could show you in this tool, but for the sake of time, let's go ahead and move on to our next tool. And great questions continue to come through. Sorry that I don't have time to answer those right now. It looks like my team is doing a great job of keeping up with most of those questions. I'll try to go back through and grab a few questions that didn't get answered previously. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to show you another tool that we offered called Channelizer. Now this is kind of our flagship spectrum analysis tool. InSSIDer is more of a basic network optimization tool, but Channelizer is what we consider to be an enterprise-grade spectrum analysis tool. And this also utilizes the Wi-Spy DBX just like InSSIDer Office does. This tool uses the same hardware, but it gives us a lot more details about what's going on. And so let's go ahead and start the demo for that, and I will show you around InSSIDer Office and how you can use it to detect and avoid non-Wi-Fi interference. And give me just one moment to get that demonstration started. All right, so now we've got Channelizer running, and I've had a quick drink of water so I can make sure I can keep speaking well. And so now we've got Channelizer running, and just like with InSSIDer Office, we're pulling our data from two sources. We're getting our Wi-Fi data from our Netgear Wi-Fi adapter, and we're also getting our spectrum analysis data from the Wi-Spy. So let's take a look at this data to see what's happening in our wireless environment live at MetaGeek right now. Now there's several different views up here. This view is called the density view, and you may notice that it's very, very similar to what we saw in InSSIDer Office. It's a very, very similar view, but in this version we give quite a bit more detail about what's going on in the spectrum. And so the first thing let's talk about this visualization a little bit more to help you understand what it means. So to help with that, I'm going to hide color by utilization, leaving just this blue line here. This blue line is showing us all of the raw radio frequency activity, all of our raw radio frequency activity in our environment right now. So we can see this line shows us what channel things are happening on. Every time you see a spike, that's a little bit of activity in the RF. And we can see what channel those are happening on by looking at the channel numbers along the bottom. We can also see how loud it is based on the height, just like we saw with InSSIDer Office. Now that blue line is really nice and all, but I'm having a really hard time keeping track of what's going on. So that's when I like to enable color by utilization again. Just like with InSSIDer Office, color by utilization shows us how often a channel is being utilized. It shows us how busy a channel is. And if you see a blue spike, that means that there was a short signal, kind of like a clap. You know, a clap doesn't really interrupt a conversation. If somebody was to walk by and clap while you're engaged in a conversation, that's not a big deal. But if somebody was to walk by with an air horn, blaring an air horn, that would definitely interrupt a conversation. Well, that's what a red spike means. Red means that there's constant activity, kind of like an air horn. Now we also have Wi-Fi scanning in here, just like with InSSIDer Office, but it's a little bit more flexible. We can still apply the same filters, like let's filter down to MetaGeek because that's the network that I care about. And so now we're just looking at the MetaGeek access points. And let's say that I want to get rid of MetaGeek Lab. I can just uncheck it, and now MetaGeek Lab is gone. So there's a little bit more flexibility for what you can and can't select with this tool. It doesn't tell you how things overlap quite as much. It doesn't flag them in red. But if you know what you're doing, it's very easy to tell whether you've got adjacent channel interference or not. Okay, so now for fun, let's fire up a non-Wi-Fi device that might cause some interference. So I'm going to start up a non-Wi-Fi device, and it's probably not going to take you very long to see where that is. If you look closely, right here on channel 13, there is a spike shape right there. And remember, blue means it was a really short signal, whereas red means it's constant. But what we can see here is that this device is turning from blue to green, it'll turn yellow, and eventually it's going to turn red because it is talking constantly, kind of like an air horn. And we can also see that this device is partially overlapping with our networks on channel 11, which means those networks and all the devices on those channels aren't even going to be able to talk. They're not even going to be able to transmit because this mystery device, whatever it is causing that interference on that channel. And pretty soon those two networks will disappear entirely because they won't even be able to talk anymore. Oh, we just lost one of the networks, and there they go. Those networks can't even talk anymore. They can't even say that they're there anymore because of this interference. Okay, so we need to figure out what this thing is. We've got a tool built in here called the Interferers tab, and this is a library of common signatures that you might find in the band. We've built in some really common things, and there's a couple of ways you can use this. First off, you could just kind of eyeball it, and we could tell that's probably not 802.11b because it's a spike, it's not a curve, that's probably not it. But you can also click on these to select them. So maybe we think it kind of looks like an AV transmitter. So what I can do here is I can click on this and hover my mouse over the density view. And I can see that just doesn't add up. That doesn't match up to being an AV transmitter. That's probably not what it is. And as I go through the list, I might notice that it looks really, really similar to this Uniden phone. And if I click on the Uniden phone and hover the shape up here, wow, I can see that matches up very, very closely. That is probably a Uniden cordless phone. So now we know what to look for. Now we know to keep an eye out for a Uniden cordless phone because that's probably what is causing interference. It might be a soundbar. I suppose that could be a soundbar, but I'm thinking that it matches up a bit more with the phone, so that's probably what we need to keep an eye out for. Now, where is it physically located? We've got another tool built in here called Device Finder, and this will basically help us physically locate this device in the spectrum. And to answer one of the questions is, which virtual machine version are you using? I'm actually using VMware Fusion, I think it's VMware Fusion 8, although Channelizer runs great in VMware Fusion and Parallels. I've also used it in VirtualBox and Linux as well. It's actually worked pretty well there as well. So to find this device, let's see if we can track it down. I'm going to click and drag in the density view to try to select this device. And so once I release my mouse button, I can click on Device Finder, and I get the option to clean up my selection a little bit. I think it looks pretty good. So let's hit the checkbox to start Device Finder mode. In Device Finder mode, we get a signal strength graph for this device. And as we walk away from this device, we'll see the signal strength graph go down. And if we start walking and getting closer to this device again, we'll see the signal strength graph go up. And as you walk around, you'll see the signal strength graph go up and down as you try to locate this device to figure out where it is. We also sell a directional antenna for the Wi-Fi called the Device Finder. It's a really cool tool that clips onto the back of your laptop, and instead of showing the signal strength from all directions so that you have to play hot and cold, you can point the Device Finder in directions to figure out where it is. So that makes finding things like cordless phones and wireless video cameras and old analog devices, it really makes it quick for tracking these devices down. If you point away from it, you'll see the signal strength go down, and if you point towards it, you'll see the signal strength graph go up. Now eventually you're going to be in the same room standing right next to that device, and you'll see the signal strength graph pretty much peak out. You know that you're looking at it, and so now you've identified where that device is and you know what it is, and as soon as you shut it off or unplug it or whatever you need to do, you'll see the signal strength graph fall to the floor because that device is no longer transmitting. So you have successfully used the Device Finder to locate and remove a device that was causing interference. Now, there are a ton of other things that I can't show you right now in Channelizer due to time. We could talk about the waterfall navigation. We could talk about how you can save recordings and play them back later. There's lots of other tabs and things to go through, lots of places to get data. But for the sake of time, we will move on to the next product. And thanks for the questions so far. Really enjoying seeing the questions come through. And it looks like Lael and Mike are doing a great job of keeping up with those questions that you might have. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to show you some really quickly some examples of different types of things that you might see in the spectrum with the Spectrum Analyzer. The first of those is what 802.11b traffic looks like. 802.11b is an older Wi-Fi standard, but the funny thing is we actually still see 802.11b all the time. If you move really far away from an access point, if your device like your laptop or your phone is really far away from an access point, it'll actually slow down to 802.11b data rates to make sure that the access point can understand it. So we still see 802.11b all the time, even though it's considered to be a very old standard. And 802.11b makes a really interesting shape in the spectrum. It makes this curve shape with the lobes down each side. Just due to the way that it puts the information on the air, it makes that curve shape in the band. And when I look at this 802.11b signature, what does that tell me about channel 1 right now? So there's channel 1. What this tells me is that this 802.11b network is keeping channel 1 really, really busy. Remember how red is kind of like an air horn? That's essentially what the 802.11b devices are here. These devices, this is probably an access point and a laptop that are talking. They are talking constantly, which means there's really no time left. There's really no time left on the channel for other devices to talk. And when you see an 802.11b shape like this, then you know that you've got a slower data rate in use like 1 or 2 or 5.5 or 11 megabits per second. That's a slower data rate. Now 802.11g and 802.11n, 802.11g and 802.11n, excuse me, my slides skipped again due to my very sensitive scroll wheel, use faster data rates like 6, 9, 12, 18, and all the way up to 54 megabits per second and beyond. And 802.11g and n use a new modulation scheme that makes a different shape in the spectrum. It kind of makes this flat tabletop shape with the shoulders down each side, kind of like this. Now, you may have noticed that in Channelizer and in InSSIDer Office, we kind of draw a square around where the networks are, because that's kind of what they look like in the spectrum. They look like that, so that's what we draw the shapes to show you where they are in the spectrum. And we can see that this 802.11g or 802.11n network is keeping things pretty busy. It's red, which means it's talking at least 50% of the time. It's keeping the channel very, very busy. And so that's a pretty busy channel. Now, we didn't look at the 5 gigahertz band, but the Wi-Fi DBX can see 5 gigahertz, and this is what it looks like. Now, remember, 5 gigahertz is really, really big in comparison. It's absolutely huge in comparison, so we have to kind of squish it down to fit it on our laptop displays. This is an 802.11a or 802.11n network, and it's still 20 megahertz wide, just like our 2.4 gigahertz counterparts. We just have to squish it down to fit it on the screen, so it looks a lot narrower than it really is. And we can see that this channel, since it's red, is very, very busy. There's a lot of Wi-Fi activity on that channel. And we can see that there's 802.11n networks all over the place. Pretty much every channel has a flat tabletop shape on it. There's an 802.11n network on just about every channel here. Some channels are pretty busy, like these 2 channels down here, but some channels are barely being used at all, like these channels here in the center. In fact, there's one channel here that doesn't have any activity at all. If you look at channel 132, that channel has nothing going on it, so that's a very, very quiet channel. Now, just to put things into perspective a little bit, if we were to overlay the 2.4 gigahertz band on this, 2.4 gigahertz is that big. 3 channels wide. That's how big the 2.4 gigahertz band is in comparison to 5 gigahertz. So make absolutely sure if you're buying new access points, if you're buying new gear, at the very, very bare minimum, make sure that you are getting dual band 802.11n access points. But really at this point you should probably be buying 802.11 AC gear that has 5 gigahertz support here. Now here's a fun one. This is a baby monitor, and this one's really fun, or really frustrating rather, because it is frequency hopping, which means it likes to move from frequency to frequency. Now this view down here, we didn't have time to talk about that in depth, but this is the waterfall view, and this shows us what's happening over time in the software. So we can see right here where this baby monitor was right here on channel 5, and we can see in the waterfall view where it talked right there on channel 5, so we can see it hung out right there on channel 5 for about 4 seconds. We can see the time over here. It hung out for about 4 seconds, and then it moved. It hopped all the way over here to channel 9, and so we could see the spike that it made there while it was on channel 9, and then it talked for about 4 more seconds, and then it hopped all the way down here to channel 1, and we can see the spike that it made there on channel 1. So this device is moving around all over the place, and that's the beauty of the waterfall view, is the waterfall view shows us how devices move around if they move around. Now one thing that I'm noticing here is that this baby monitor, when it hopped down onto channel 1, if you look closely at channel 1, what do you see there? In the background, if we look really, really closely, there is a flat tabletop shape right there, which means there is an 802.11g or 802.11n network right there on channel 1, which means that this baby monitor made a really bad decision, and it hopped on to the same channel as this wireless network. And you know what this baby monitor is going to do while it's on that same channel? It's going to jam out that wireless network. That wireless network is basically going to be quiet, and it's not going to try to transmit anymore because of that baby monitor. But soon, my guess is that this baby monitor is probably going to hop to a different channel again anyway, right? It's probably going to move to a different channel at some point. And what this means for the end user is that the Wi-Fi is going to work, and then it won't work, and then it'll work, and then it won't work, and that's going to be really frustrating for the end user. This is what Bluetooth looks like, and Bluetooth, funny enough, makes a bunch of blue spikes all over the spectrum. That's not why it's called Bluetooth, just kind of funny coincidence. But Bluetooth works by rapidly frequency hopping all over the band, all over the place. But it hops so quickly that we can't even see a pattern in Channelizer because it just moves so quickly, but we can see that it hops all over the place. Now what color are all these spikes? Well, they're blue, which means it's not talking very often, which means that it's not really going to interfere with our wireless network very much. It's talking less than 10% of the time, so that's going to leave 90% of the time for other devices to talk like Wi-Fi, so it's not going to be a big deal. Now here's a really fun one. This is an analog wireless video camera. These are those X10 wireless video cameras, and as you can see, it is dark red, which means it is talking constantly. These things absolutely wreck wireless networks, which is why I like to show them as an example. You won't see them in the wild very often these days, but they're still out there. And so just keep an eye out for those, because those can really wreck a wireless network. And hey, as a bonus, look right here on channel 6. If you look very closely, there is a very faint curve shape right there, which means there is a little bit of 802.11b activity on channel 6. So with a spectrum analyzer, there's a lot of cool stuff that you can see. You really get a good look at, you finally get to see those non-Wi-Fi interference, that might be absolutely wrecking your wireless network, and you can use it to see how busy each channel is, which is absolutely critical when you're deploying a wireless network. Now, to kind of take things up a notch, let's talk about packet analysis for just a moment. We've been talking about spectrum analysis, which is looking at the raw radio frequency activity. It's basically looking at the electromagnetic stuff in the air, right? Looking at the raw RF. A packet analyzer is a special tool that can capture all the wireless packets out of the air. It can actually listen to those conversations that are happening in the air, and it can capture those and show you what happened during your wireless packet capture. Our tool for this is called IPA, and what makes it unique is that it's a very visual spectrum analysis tool. And you can use that to see who's talking fast and who's talking slow. Devices that talk slowly are going to take up more time on the air. They take a lot more time to say what they need to say, and so we want to make sure that devices talk as quickly as possible. It's kind of like a slow kid in the back of the classroom. If you have a classroom full of people, and there's a teacher and there's a whole bunch of students, you're all essentially sharing the same channel, right? Only one device can talk at a time, just like only one person can talk at a time in a classroom, and usually it's the teacher that's talking. But sometimes students will raise their hand and they can ask a question, and everybody has to stop and wait for that student to finish asking the question. But we've all been in a class where there's been somebody in the very back of the classroom that they raise their hand and they take a very long time to ask the question, and everybody kind of gets impatient because of that. We've all been in a situation like that. Well, Wi-Fi devices can do the same thing. If a Wi-Fi device is using a slow data rate, maybe it's far away from the access point, so it's to slow down to be heard by the access point. Or maybe there's a lot of interference, and so it's having to talk more slowly to make sure that the access point can understand. Or maybe it's just an old 802.11g or 802.11b device, and so it has to talk slower because it just can't go any faster. Those devices are kind of like the person that talks slowly in the back of the classroom that holds everyone up. And a packet analysis tool like ours is called IPA, which stands for I Packet Analysis, because we visualize it with these multi-layered pie charts. So it's a very visual process, and the pie charts kind of look like eyes, and our developers really like beer, so it gets called IPA. With IPA, you can get a really, really in-depth look at co-channel interference. Remember, we talked about co-channel interference. We can look at all the activity from the laptops and the tablets and the smartphones and the access points to see who's talking fast, who's talking slow, who's repeating themselves. With packet analysis, we get to see the details of 802.11 congestion on a specific channel. We can really drill down into a specific channel to see what's going on. So if your channel is really, really busy, if there's a lot of activity on that channel, if you look at it with a spectrum analyzer, maybe you look at a channel with a spectrum analyzer and it looks like this, and you want to know why, that's when you break out a packet analysis tool to really see what's going on that channel so that you can determine who's at fault and what you need to do to fix it. And next is a site survey tool. Whoops, my slides just jumped again. Sorry about that. With a site survey tool, this is a mapping and planning tool, and site survey tools allow you to do a couple of different things. So we don't make any site survey tools, but we resell some excellent, as does Streakwave, resell some excellent site survey tools, including VisiWave, Tamograph, and Ekahau. All three of them are excellent site survey tools by different companies that I have lots of friends in the wireless industry that love these tools, and we love them too. And with these tools, you can do a couple of different things. You can draw heat maps for existing networks, or you can plan a new network virtually. So let me explain what that means. So this is actually a picture of the floor plan here at MetaGeek. And if you want to know where I am sitting right there. That's my office. And Lael is sitting right there, just down the hall from me. So here's our office here at MetaGeek. And one thing that we did with this is we actually moved into this office about a year ago. We've only been here for about a year. Really nice new office. We're really enjoying it here. And in this office, we didn't have access to this building while they were filling in the floor. Originally, when we signed our name to take this building, this floor actually had no walls and it was an empty floor. But we had a floor plan. We knew it was going to be there. And so our IT guy and I, Rich is his name, he and I sat down with this tool and we drew in all of our wall types in this floor plan. So they gave us a PDF, and so we went through and we drew in our wall types. We said, hey, this is going to be a divider, this is going to be a divider, this is all brick around the outside. There's a few windows here. This is drywall, this is drywall, this is drywall. And so we told the software where all the walls were, and then we dropped in access points. We clicked and said, okay, well, we're going to put a Cisco 3600 here, and a Cisco 3700 here, and a Cisco 3600 here, and then the software calculates out what the coverage is going to look like. So we can see if we have any dead spots, we can make sure that there's coverage everywhere, and more importantly, much more importantly than just coverage, we also made sure that our cells didn't overlap too much. We made sure that this network was on, or this access point was on channel 1, this access point was on channel 6, this access point was on channel 11, and this access point was back on channel 6. We don't, or channel 1 rather. Whoops. We don't want to put our channel 1 access points right next to each other, because then they'd be sharing the same channel and they'd have to take turns talking. So what's the point of another access point? So you can use a site survey tool to not only make sure that you have coverage everywhere, but to minimize those co-channel interference issues. To make sure that you can use it to make sure that that you don't have access points that are on the same channel that are just going to have to take turns talking anyway. Really, really critical function. And then finally, once you're done planning that new network virtually, eventually we got into the building. Rich and I got into the building and we put up our access points where we figured they should go based on the virtual plan that we did. We moved them around while we were virtually planning them. And then we were able to do a real site survey. And with a real site survey, that's where you have a Wi-Fi adapter on your machine and you walk around the floor plan. and you click whenever you change directions. So we walked all over the place. We went into all the offices, we went through all the doorways, we went all over the place in this building, and what that did is that gathered data the whole time, and so the site survey tool was able to build out a real coverage map based on all the data that we gathered. So every time I switch directions, I kind of tend to walk in very straight lines, I would just click on the software. So I go click, and then click, and then click, and then click as we moved around, so the software knows exactly where I am as I'm walking around the building. So you cover the building very thoroughly, and it draws up a map of what the coverage actually looks like. And we learned some stuff from that. We ended up moving this access point over towards the corner a little bit. We ended up moving this access point towards this corner. We kind of ended up adjusting things to make sure that everything was right where it needs to be for the best performance for this wireless network. Doing a site survey and using virtual planning, I would say, is right up there with spectrum analysis. It's one of the most important things that you can do. Really understanding how to effectively design a wireless network is absolutely critical today. And so I strongly recommend getting yourself a site survey tool and just kind of a quick comparison of the different tools that are out there. They all function very similarly. Our three favorites here are VisiWave, Tamagraph, and Ekahau. And they all have varying levels of options available. One thing that both Tamagraph adds and that Ekahau adds is they both add that virtual RF planning component. So if you need to plan a new building virtually, then Tamagraph and Ekahau are great ways to do that, and they also support multiple floors, so that if you have a multi-story building, Tamagraph and Ekahau are great for that as well. You can still do it with VisiWave, but you'll need to start a new site survey file for each of those individual floors. And VisiWave does not have the virtual RF planning component, so it still has some great tools you can use to move access points around and figure out where they should go, but it just doesn't do the virtual RF planning. So all of them are three very excellent tools. I love all three of them, and it's often hard for me to pick which one I want to use on a given day, since I have them all available at any given time. My recommendation is that if you're kind of a smaller business who wants to do your own site survey for your own office, VisiWave is a great tool for that, or maybe you only do the occasional deployment. VisiWave is a great tool. Tamagraph gets a little bit more serious. The price is still very competitive, but it's a bit more serious of a tool that adds the virtual RF planning. And then Ekahau is, in my opinion, the top of the line site survey tool. That's great if you're doing very large deployments where maybe you're doing more than a few hundred access points. Maybe you're getting up into the thousands of access points on a large campus. That's when Ekahau really gets to be a great tool. Maybe you're a person that does deployments every day. You design and install wireless networks. That's what you do. Then Ekahau is going to be the best of the best out there for that. So they're all three great tools. They all just have different focuses. Now, to kind of compare the MetaGeek software, this is available on our website if you'd like to take a look at that to see exactly how they compare. The biggest thing that I like to say is the difference between Channelizer and InSSIDer, since they both use the same hardware, is that InSSIDer is great for picking the best channels for your wireless network. If you have 5 or 6 access points, kind of like we do here at MetaGeek, this is a great tool to make sure that you're on good channels. This is a great tool for making sure that you've got the best security in place. And this is a great way to see which networks are all nearby, and you can also see how busy those channels are because we get the Wi-Fi data there as well. Whereas Channelizer is great for locating non-Wi-Fi interference. If you're running into interference from cordless phones and wireless video cameras, it can actually help you identify it, and you can actually identify it with this tool and go track it down. So that's kind of the big difference between them. And then IEPA, this is the packet analysis tool that we talked about. IEPA is great for finding top talkers to see who's using the most airtime, and it's great for looking at all the packet traffic to see what's going on a specific channel on your wireless network. So these are the three main tools that MetaGeek offers, and these are the major differences between them. If you'd like more details, head over to our website, and there's a comparison page that you can take a look at. And there's 3 different models of WiSpy as well. That's the spectrum analyzer that we talked about earlier. The WiSpy Mini this one works with InSSIDer Office. So this one works with InSSIDer Office and is 2.4 gigahertz only. It has an internal antenna, so it's very compact, very small. And the WiSpy 2.4X and the WiSpy DBX, these both work with Channelizer. The WiSpy 2.4X is 2.4 gigahertz only, and the WiSpy DBX is 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and they both include an external antenna for increased sensitivity. All right, thanks for attending this webinar today. At this time, I'd like to try to answer some questions. Maybe you have some more questions. Let me look through the list really quick here to see if there's any questions that I missed. It looks like, Lael, it looks like you've answered most of these. Great job. Thank you very much. Maybe, let's see. I answered the question about which virtual machine software we're using. Thanks, Blaine and Mike. Thanks for the compliments. I really appreciate that. So yeah, it looks like. One question I got from Mike is the Mac beta still open? What's needed for the Mac beta? Great question, Mike. So yes, the Mac beta is still open. I can show it to you really quick if you like. So I'm going to just open that up really quick. We'll just switch over to OS 10. So I'm launching InSSIDer Office for Mac now. This is currently in beta, so it's missing a few of the features like the expert tips, and you can't rename APs and some things like that are missing from the Mac version. If you buy InSSIDer Office for Windows, the Windows key will activate the Mac beta. So don't expect it to work perfectly, and don't expect all the features to be there. But this tool is totally here and available for you if you own the Windows version. Also, one thing that I didn't point out is when you connect a Wi-Spy to one of these, a Wi-Spy Mini or 2.4x or DVX, you can actually export a recording file. If you export a recording file, that recording file can be opened up in Channelizer for more in-depth analysis. Both the Windows version and the Mac version do that. So this is available. Feel free to go check it out if you've got a copy of InSSIDer for Windows. Your key will activate this. Let me look for another question to answer here. Let's see, one question I had from Rick here. Is there a way to find out if a neighboring office is blocking APs? That's a good question, Rick. That's a very advanced question. So there are access points to kind of give some context for everyone. There are access points out there that are considered rogue access points. If you plug in an access point on a network that's not authorized, like let's say that I wanted to circumvent our wireless network here, I wanted to have my own Wi-Fi, I could bring in my own access point and I could plug it in here. And the problem with that is that opens up a security hole. Now, one thing that as far as looking to see if a neighbor is blocking rogue access points, that's a very advanced topic. And if you'd like to contact us at support@metageek.com, Rick, I'd be more than happy to answer that question for you, but that's a very advanced question. And Jeff, what are the costs for the spectrum analyzers? I would recommend contacting Streakwave. They would be more than happy to get you pricing for those. A question from Jason is, do you need a Wi-Spy to use Channelizer? Yes, you do. Channelizer relies on the Wi-Spy, and so you do need a Wi-Spy to use Channelizer. A question from Todd is, will the original Wi-Spy work with InSSIDer? Unfortunately, it won't. If you go to our knowledge base and you type in Wi-Spy original on our knowledge base, you can get Channelizer 2, which will work with the original Wi-Spy. However, that device was released back in 2006 when MetaGeek was founded, and so unfortunately it's not compatible with current versions. A question from Sean is, do you need the Wi-Spy Mini or can you use your built-in network adapter? Sean, we actually pull data from both. We actually pull Wi-Fi data from the network adapter on your computer, and we pull the spectrum analysis data from the Wi-Spy. You can purchase InSSIDer Office without a Wi-Spy. However, I don't recommend doing that. I do strongly recommend getting a Wi-Spy Mini. It's not that much more, and it gives a lot more capability to the software. And a question from Ed is, to locate hidden access points in a building, what do we recommend? Ed, you can use the signal strength over time graph in either Channelizer or InSSIDer, and those will show you the signal strength graph going up and down, and you can walk around until you see that signal strength go to the highest, and then you know that you're standing right next to your access point. Also, a lot of site survey tools, in fact, all the ones that I showed you today, VisiWave, Tamagraph, and Ekahau, when you do a site survey, they will actually place an icon on the map to show you where they think the access point is. I find that they're usually accurate within about 5 or 6 feet, so a site survey tool is also a great way to locate a hidden access point that can get you really, really close to where that access point is. All right, great. We're about 4 minutes past the hour here, so I think it's time to wrap up the webinar. If you have any more technical questions about our products or any questions that I didn't get to today, feel free to email me at support or open a ticket at support.metageek.com. I am the support guy here. That's the fastest way to get a hold of me. You could also ask those questions on Twitter. I am available on Twitter to answer any of your questions about Wi-Fi or MetaGeek products. I'm more than happy to do that. And also, there is an excellent Wi-Fi community on Twitter. I highly recommend getting involved there if you want to continually learn more about Wi-Fi. It's a great continual conversation that's happening there as well. Mike, You there?
Thanks very much, Joel. That's outstanding. A lot of great information and
You're welcome.
a lot of great questions. We'll definitely get the slide deck out and have the recording available on YouTube very shortly for some review. Again, the full suite of information on the various bands, different types of interferers, and fundamentally the need for these kind of tools if you're an end user in an IT organization running a network. It's a must to really understand what's happening. I know there's a lot of wired analysis tools, and then folks sort of let the wireless kind of just look at the access point. But again, there's so many wireless clients out there that you'd be surprised what you'll see when you get these types of tools to look under the hood. So at any rate, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be giving away 4 of those WiSpy minis with InSSIDer Office, and we'll have those very shortly, and as well a promotion for everyone who attended will be available, and you've got my contact information as well as Joel. So please continue with any other questions. We also have the MetaGeek page on our website